All right, welcome everybody into the Big Douglas Show. Thought there was a video going to happen there, but it didn't. That's all right. Technical difficulties, that they say. It's Inside the Command Center Friday, so we're going to take a look at the program. Obviously, to do that, Mitch Tischler joins me. Mitch, what's happening, big guy?
Not a whole lot. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. It's warm down here at the beach, so I broke the tank top out one last time. I know before we got started, you have the hoodie on, so I thought maybe it was cool up there, but no, it's surprisingly warm in the DMV today.
Oh yeah, it's warm up here. It's a good 60, 70 degrees outside. About to get a thunderstorm, it looks like. So
Well, I had planned on opening with it's getting cold outside. What's your go-to soup and sandwich deal? We'll still start with that because it is going to be cold soon. Tell me, I know we've had many sandwich conversations over the year. What kind of soup are we doing in the wintertime?
the PB&J is my favorite sandwich. But if we're doing a soup and sandwich, I like a good chili with a grilled cheese. I know grilled cheese tomato soup's supposed to be the thing, but I like a good chili with a grilled cheese.
Now, here's the question, of course, is in your chili, you've got beans, you've got meat. Everything's in the pot for you with the chili, or are you very specific about how it's done?
I like a spicy chili, so you throw all the peppers that you got in the pot with some onions, garlic, yeah, ground beef, beans, the whole kit and caboodle. Top it off with some cheese. It's fantastic.
There you go. I like to crunch saltine crackers into mine. You go to town, but I don't like the beans, so maybe that's the difference. Maybe that's what. All right, let's talk a little bit of football. Eugene Shen in. What does it mean?
I think it's the first major hire, the first major move that really the Harris Group has made, and I think it's a big move. I think the timing of it isn't by accident. I think right before the trade deadline, the Harris Group is getting in somebody that they trust, that they know, and that they want to have a little bit of oversight into what this current front office and football side of things are going to do at the trade deadline. And we know the Harris Group likes analytics and likes getting into the nitty gritty of the numbers, and that's not something that Ron Rivera and Jack Del Rio are particularly savvy in. They made a couple moves in training camp to bring in a couple of people who are in the analytics community to help out. But I think this is a departure from kind of the way that this organization has ever been run on the football side, and it's a sign of a new day here in DC.
They have not been very big in analytics around here. I think they had one of the smaller departments, like 2 or 3 guys in a closet somewhere. I don't think it was very big, right? 6, maybe.
I believe for about 10 years they had one guy. And then they expanded to, I believe, 4 during training camp this year. And I think you can tell from some of the on-field moves that, those folks are in the building. I don't know that they have a ton of say in what's happening and, what the right move is at the right time. I think, Ron Rivera is kind of an old school football coach and likes to coach by his gut. And, if his gut was, if they were winning more games, I think folks wouldn't bat an eye at it. But, when you're not winning games and kind of making some questionable decisions, I think it creates a pathway for a big move like this.
Now he gets here. He joins the franchise on November 6th, so we'll be off the trade. The trade deadline will be over. That's October 31st. What do we make of the timing? I mean, they really wanted to make a splash. He started yesterday, right, and been here during the trade deadline. So I guess 2 questions, in a broader approach here is what do you make of the timing? And do you think is there any action before the deadline?
I think that he may join the team November 6th, but if you don't think that he has input between today and Tuesday, I have a bridge in Brooklyn to sell you, or whatever the saying is. I think the timing is interesting. I mean, the announcement, if they wanted to actually wait till November 6th, they would have probably made that announcement, in a couple days. I think that he's going to have some say here as we get to the deadline. And as to whether there's going to be actual action, I don't know. I'm not sold that. First of all, I don't know that there's a whole lot of guys on this roster that have trade value. I mean,
who are they?
I think
who are they?
Yeah, I think Montez Sweat. I think Chase Young. But I think Commanders fans have to temper their expectations about what they're getting for these guys. Both of them are on expiring deals and are, pending free agents and, don't have team control. So, and neither have put up kind of monster numbers here. So I think you're looking at probably a third rounder, for
Right.
those guys, which, isn't the best compensation, but better to get something than let those guys walk.
You get and you get them now instead of in 2 years, right? People forget the comp pick's not good for 2 years.
Right. And I also think that, that shows you the depths of what this franchise has done, that Commanders fans are even concerned about comp picks, because the comp pick is a third rounder, but it's really a fourth rounder. It's at the end of the third round into the fourth round. So it's not like you're really getting, necessarily high quality picks. And it's also dependent on who you sign and kind of the mechanisms of, what money
Right.
goes out the door and what money comes in. The Commanders have a bunch of money available next year. There's going to be, they're going to sign a fair number of players and have money to spend. So there may not even be a compensatory pick,
That's a great point.
for Montez or Chase. It's not a guarantee that those are happening. On the offensive side of the ball, I think you got to look at maybe Curtis Samuel might be somebody who, might garner a little bit of attention. He's also a free agent at the end of the year. But, I could you imagine Curtis Samuel in that Kansas City offense? I feel like he could do some damage over there. So I think there's, I think there'll be interest in Montez and Chase as kind of the two main pieces. Outside of that, I don't know that there's going to be a ton of market for anyone else on this roster.
Yeah, because you're not trading away Terry, you're not trading away John Allen or Deron Payne. I mean, those are guys again with value, but I can't see any of them being moved. Those are the pieces you have to bring back pieces, though.
I would actually argue the other way. If somebody came with a real trade offer for Deron and John, I would be willing to at least listen to it. That's a lot of money that they tied up in the interior of a defensive line that has underperformed, essentially for the entirety of their, outside of, some big games here and there, but as a consistent performance, that's a lot of money tied up into the middle of the defensive line. And certainly if you're an analytics guy and if you're going down positional values and, where money needs to be spent in an organization, I don't know that there's going to be a lot of charts that have defensive line at, close to 40 mil a year. So again, I don't believe that either of those guys are being
2 years left, right? So I mean, he gives you a little bit more contract value.
Yeah, I don't know that either of those guys get moved,
it'd be interesting.
Yeah, I'd be interested in listening. I mean, I've been saying outside of Terry McLaurin, I don't know there's anyone else on this roster that is absolutely hands off. Have they made a move and signed Cam Curl to a deal before this season? He would be in the group of hands off, but he's the pending free agent as well. And as a seventh rounder, there's no franchising. He's going to be an unrestricted free agent, and he's going to be able to get to decide where he goes. And, I don't know one way or the other how he feels about being in DC, but I would have loved to have locked him up and had him and Terry as my two guys that are untouchable.
And you assume that's because everything was in flux, or they weren't, or they wanted to see more from Cam this year. What does your gut tell you there?
My gut tells you that the people in charge will say it's because the ownership was in flux, and the player and agent and that side of it will tell you that, Ron and Martin and Marty were so proud of themselves with what they did with Deron Payne, making him earn his contract and then being able to sit up at the podium and pat themselves on the back for, we made this guy play for his contract and look how great he played. And, we were happy to reward him. So everyone else that's in this organization, you guys can play your butts off and we'll reward you. So I think it's probably a little bit from both sides of it, but ultimately I think if they really wanted to get that deal done, they would have been able to get it done.
It's interesting how things change once the season gets going a little bit compared to before the season starts. Before the season starts, you've got Montez at a podium saying, "Hey, Deron showed us how to get the bag," and he did. And now you've got interviews with Montez I saw from just yesterday where it's like, Well, it's been great. I've loved my time here with the fellas, and I get that's what they say, but the juxtaposition is quite different from a couple of months ago.
Well, and we were in the locker room when the Nick Bosa contract came down, and the widening of the eyes of kind of all of the defensive linemen, but in particular the two guys on the edge was apparent as they realized there's a pretty big bag to be had if you're able to ball out.
I would suggest you tell me that re-signing James Smith-Williams is just as, if not more important than either of the two huge DNs that we have.
Yes, I think he's important to re-sign. I think that he's a really nice piece and a good backup and does a lot on teams. I think Andre Jones, the seventh rounder from Louisiana Tech, kind of is the same type of player, and he's on a rookie deal. I think it depends on kind of what happens at the end of the season with the coaching staff and the front office and kind of where priorities lay. James Smith Williams is a good player, a good guy in the locker room, and those are important things. And he plays teams well, so he's certainly a underrated, valuable piece.
Let's go back to Shen just for a little bit, because I think people are confused as to like where he is on the hierarchy. I was reading a piece earlier that was talking about his time with the Ravens, and not just that specifically, I guess, but more about the head of the analytics department generally having the head coach's ear and the GM's ear a bit more. How important is this guy, and where do you see him ultimately being on the hierarchy scale? I mean, I know he's VP of football strategy, I guess is the title, but where is he on the org chart exactly, do you think?
I think he is equal to Martin Mayhew in terms of maybe a step above Martin Mayhew. Having the ear of the coach only matters if the coach is interested in analytics. This hire is,
but the new coach will be into analytics, right? I mean, you'd have to assume that if they hire a primetime analytics guy first, that the rest of the guys will at least have some interest in analytics.
I believe so, and I mean, you're jumping to the conclusion that Ron is definitely gone at the end of the season. I feel very strongly that that's the case, but I'm not ready to, put a stamp on it as it's 100% a done deal.
Well, real quick, before we move on from that, let's just hit it real quick. There's no way they keep Ron on a dead year contract, right? So you're either letting Ron go or you're giving him an extension for 2 years, right? It just doesn't happen that you sit on 1 year.
Right. Let me be clear. I think Ron should be gone. I believe that this coaching staff as a whole needs to be wiped out. The front office needs to be wiped out. This is a hit the reset button and start from there. So that's my personal feelings. Now, new ownership is coming in, and they can make incremental changes, and maybe an incremental change is bringing in a real GM, and some analytics folks, and maybe they like what Ron has done in terms of what he's done within the organization. I don't know. I'm just saying that there's no guarantee that Ron is gone at the end of the year. The hire is
at what?
What's that?
You'd put the percentage at what?
95.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I'm not trying to talk out of both sides of my mouth here, but
I got you.
The hire is important because it's the first major hire for Josh Harris. Right. It also signals what we know is that he's interested in analytics and wants to involve them in his football team. We know that the current group doesn't do that very much. I don't know how much of an impact this guy is going to have in the 2 months that he's going to be here before this season ends. I think it's more bringing him in to get a baseline set of information and knowledge and working, information as to how the football side operates now and evaluate whether that is the correct way, the incorrect way. There's middle of the road. I think he's going to ultimately be the mouthpiece to the Harris group, to the ownership group, as to what works, what doesn't work, what needs to change, what can stay the same within the football side of the organization.
Who eventually makes the GM hire, do you think? I mean, is this Shen guy, is he going to have a lot of input onto who the next GM is? Is that something that will come strictly from ownership? How do you think that comes together?
I would expect it to be a collaborative effort. That as we go through this process, I think to me it's going to be important, and this organization hasn't done this very much to build this thing from the top down. Whereas so many times they brought in a coach and then brought in a GM afterwards, or both coach and GM at the same time. I think we've seen up close the kind of the issue, the juxtaposition between Ron Rivera, the GM, and Ron Rivera, the head coach, and how often those two things, are butting heads, because your GM should be building to the future. And if you're building towards the future, Ricky Stromberg would be starting at center on Sunday. But if you're trying to scrape out a couple extra wins, you roll out 31-year-old Tyler Larson to play center. And, and that's, to me, that's a problem. And, I don't know that this small piece, the who's starting at center, is the axe for me. But as I was saying on our podcast, the second that Ron Rivera is more interested in getting to 7, 8, or 9 wins and eschews growth of these young kids, and that means getting Chris Rodriguez more carries, allowing Emmanuel Forbes to work his way, to work out some of his issues on defense, Quan Martin as well, getting Ricky Stromberg and Chris Paul into the game a little bit, just to see what you have as you start moving forward. When he starts going away from building for the future, that's when it becomes troublesome to me that he's the head coach and that he's running things here.
I've said it a million times on this podcast. I could not agree with you more about the way the two just cannot function in the same way. And also with Stromberg, they're going to put him over at guard. I mean, again, if the point
maybe,
well, okay, let's say maybe. I get that, but let's assume that we've seen Larson snapping the ball this week, and so they'll put Stromberg at guard. Again, isn't that doing it backwards? Like, if the plan is for Stromberg to be the center going forward, let him be the damn center and then put somebody else at guard. Like, I don't appreciate that way. The only reason I like the idea of putting in a guy with more experience at center, I guess, is to help with the checks and the calls at the line, because it was obvious in the Giants game that whether it was Gates or Howe, they were missing which way to slide the protection in, and they were easy things just to be able to see. I mean, some of those sacks you could see, hey, we got an overload over here and nobody's moved it. So that's the only reason I could see maybe putting in a Larson, other than the fact that they tend to win football games when he's in, is that it would help him with the checks, I guess, at the line.
Here's the thing. You gave Chris Paul every rep at starting left guard when Sadiq Charles was out, right? And during training camp and whatnot. And maybe Ricky Stromberg was active because he's a center/guard, so he gives you a little more help. Tyler Larson's been active too to play center. So they like Stromberg at guard over center. This is a guy who started for 4 straight years in the SEC as a starting center. His senior year, they had the best rushing attack in the SEC. This isn't a developmental piece. This is a guy who's played a lot of football and played a lot of football at a high level. And if he's your quote unquote center of the future, or whatever you want to call him, he's either ready to play center and you're getting him reps at guard so that he has the positional flex BS that Ron loves to spew, or he's not. And if you're bringing in Tyler Larson, then you're telling me that he's not ready to play center. And the last 7 weeks, you've been making him take reps at guard when he should be getting reps at center and getting himself ready to play. You have a guy in-house who you clearly like in Chris Paul at guard. Otherwise, he wouldn't have gotten all those reps during training camp. So it's just, to me, it's exactly what they did to Sam Cosmi. He was a tackle, he was a guard, he was a tackle, he was a guard. Let's rotate him in. He'll play both positions. All that does is stunt their growth. This positional flex thing works when you bring in a veteran who has all the experience in the world playing tackle, and you start working him in a guard a little bit because you want him to be able to move over there. These young kids have to learn how to play in the NFL. And the fact that you're not going to Ricky here is either an indictment of Ricky himself at center, your draft strategy, or the overall plan on the offensive line that this organization has had. And it's a joke that we're 4 years into this situation and Ron wants to sit there at the podium and preach about how you win in the trenches, win in the trenches. They've invested the least amount of capital amongst the starting O-line of any team in the NFL. So, it's just it frustrates me to no end, and it boggles my mind that Ron can sit up there and say these things and not practice them.
And I'd hate to even get into it, but I will just reiterate that the draft strategy was ridiculous this year, and I don't know how do you draft 3, 4, and 5, and they're not going to play, and you kind of knew they weren't going to play, and or hope that they wouldn't play because of the other pieces you got. How come we're having a full offensive line conversation? We haven't talked about Wiley. To me, if we're starting to replace people, he ought to be up towards the top of the list. No.
Yeah, I mean, certainly, yes. Wiley's was better against the Giants, which I don't want to give him too much credit for being better, but was better than he had been. And an offensive line that had a lot of trouble against the Giants. This wasn't Wiley's. I think this goes back to some Eric Bieniemy trust and familiarity that he has with Wiley, and we've seen over the years from Andrew. If you look at kind of PFF stats, which again I don't give a ton of credence to, but certainly some. He gets better as the years go on, but at the end of the day, like Cornelius Lucas coming in and playing at either tackle position is fine. He's not a significant upgrade over either Leno or Wiley. I don't think that Stromberg or Paul are significant upgrades over Sadiq or Cosme. I don't know that Larson is a significant upgrade over Gates. The problem is that your starters and backups are all about the same level, and
Correct.
You can mix and match pieces and try and find what works together in short stints. But you're rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic. This thing is going south, and it's not like any of these guys are going to step in and make a huge difference. By the way, the field goal block last week against the Giants of Joey Slice, Tyler Larson is the guy that got pushed back 5 yards into the backfield and let Dexter Lawrence get to the ball. I mean, I think Tyler Larson's a fine player, an average player. I know fans love this 6-1-1 record with him, in the game or whatever. I think that's more circumstantial than it is, causation versus correlation or whatever. But it's all it's all just rearranging deck chairs on the Titanic, and I hate it.
You had mentioned the Beltway football podcast earlier. You're down to 2 now. And what's the difference between Pete's gone on to new adventures? Does it feel different now? There's just the 2 of you.
It's a little different. I mean, there have been a lot of changes in our network. We were NBC Sports Washington, and now we're Monumental Sports Network. So, it's our leadership has changed, and some of the dynamics of the things that we do have changed. But they've expanded our programming, so we do a TV show, and it's a little more football. I think we stay on topic a little bit more. We have a little more hardcore football, a little less shtick, which some people like, some people miss. But at the end of the day, we miss Pete. We love him. We hung out with him up in New York last week when we were up there. He's doing really well. He loves his new job, and he's excited about it. And for JP and I, we're happy that he's happy and that things are going well for him.
Yeah. I've said a bunch, and I still believe this. I don't think there'll be any in-season changes at all. I don't think they'll be active at the deadline. I don't think anybody's getting fired. I'm not sure that it does anybody any good other than just to say, hey, we fired some people. Like, okay, people say, well, give Eric Bieniemy a shot. Okay, well, if you agree that he's never really called plays that much, or think that he was, that he had input, putting more work on him probably isn't helpful. Also, if you're an EB fan, I'd ask when the last time the interim head coach got the actual head coaching job as it started. I guess somebody told me it was Marone in like 2002 with Jacksonville. Point remains, it doesn't happen very often. So if you're rooting for EB, him getting the interim probably isn't it. You fired Jack Del Rio. Who on the staff's called defensive plays before?
One guy. Can you name him?
Yeah, the coach. Yeah, the head man.
Oh, fine. I meant the position coaches.
Oh, no. Is there? I didn't know. Who is it?
Juan Castillo, who's currently your running game coordinator and / offensive line coach. But when he was in Philly, he went from O-line coach to D coordinator over there. But
That's true.
I agree
Right.
with you overall. I don't expect many changes. Eric Bieniemy, by the way, is the assistant head coach, and with this team right now,
Yeah.
and has had plenty of input in the back end of things, in the football operations side of things. And to me, that's the one place where I'm certainly have been frustrated with his in-game play calling and adjustments and stuff like that. But going back to training camp with the speed and the attention to detail and the way the camp was run, it was run in a professional way, in a professional format. The Commanders have done enough joint practices over the years, back to when they were Redskins and Washington football, that you saw how other teams ran camp, particularly when the Patriots came down to Richmond in 2012, I want to say, maybe, and you saw that here in Washington for the first time in a while. And I think that when you talk about what happens after the season, there is the play on the field and there is the Sam Howell development, and you do have to pay attention to how EB's calling games and doing all that. But also, as a head coach, you're responsible for so much of the football operations stuff behind the scenes, the timing of practices, the timing of meetings, the way that the way the practices are run, just so many little details. And certainly things are much different with Eric Bieniemy here. And you talk about Eugene Shen being in here and evaluating everything that's going on. There's certainly a lane where Eric Bieniemy has been very good at the football operations side of things, and so he gets an opportunity to be head coach with somebody coming in, as an offensive coordinator to help out on that side of things. I'm not saying that's going to happen, but there's a lane for that, and
No,
I think
I did
we
that.
got to recognize that there's kind of the two sides of it. There's the OC portion and the assistant head coach portion of them.
Which is why I love having these conversations, because I wouldn't have thought about it that way. But I totally see what you're saying there as far as what that title they required of him as part of the gig. What is kind of your biggest surprise of the season so far that you expected to go? Obviously, you expect to go one way and it didn't. What so far is that for you? Do you think?
I mean, it's been Eric Bieniemy and the play calling. Whoever was in charge of whatever roles in Kansas City, it kind of didn't matter to me. Just being around kind of Andy Reid in that offense and being able to absorb kind of what they were doing, I think is super important. And I was excited and am excited to see what Eric Bieniemy has this season. We are getting to the point where it's not early in the season anymore, but he is a guy who's learning how to handle play calling and in-game adjustments and working off his first 15 play script and all those different things. And there are pieces of this offense. I mean, heck, when was the last time the Commanders' offense was scoring 30 points a game? This is the fact that they're able to score is a step up from kind of the past however many years you want to say. So, and there have been pieces that have worked along the way, and I hope that we're going to see him kind of incorporate some of that. So I think he gets stuck in this, my offense is my offense, and it's going to work because it's a genius offense type thing. And it's not just him. I think this is a problem across the NFL with offensive coordinators is they fall in love with their scheme and they don't want to adjust based on the players that they have in front of them. So what I'm hoping is that he starts adjusting a little bit and mixes in some more of the pop passes, some more of the, screen game, a little bit more of the, new age things that we see across the NFL that, has always kind of escaped, a Commanders Washington football offense. And so, I was surprised. I thought that he was going to be a more succinct play caller. And I thought that he was going to have this offense rolling quicker and not getting bogged down in some of the things they get bogged down in. And it's not all on him. Obviously, the quarterback, plays a big part of it. O-line, receivers. It's the pie isn't all in Bieniemy's face, but certainly I think that he can do a better job earlier in games of getting Sam in rhythm while also getting the ball into his playmakers' hands. And I hope as we move forward that we start seeing him mature as a play caller and start kind of working in-game adjustments and quick game and taking advantage of over aggressive defenses.
I wish they played more quick game, like that 2-minute offense where Sam's kind of just getting in a rhythm and they're rolling a little bit, doing the screens. We started out screen heavy. Feels like some games there's no screens, and that disappoints me. For the people that say, and you know how this comes, it comes every year around this time in this city, how much better do we look with Jacoby Brissett in the game? And to those people, you say what?
They won't look better. I can promise you that much. Jacoby is Alex Smith reincarnate. He's a veteran who's probably not going to turn the ball over much, but not going to give you much downfield. And if you look at the way that teams are playing the Commanders, early on in the season, the Cardinals, showed him how to do it. Then obviously the Bills and Bears, and as we've gone along, if you blitz this team, you can get to the quarterback with just 4 guys and keep 7 guys close to the line of scrimmage. If you blitz this team, you can get them moving quicker. And, the wide receivers haven't done a good enough job separating from DBs to allow Sam to get rid of the ball quickly. Some of it's been Sam has missed guys, and some of it's been O-line letting guys quit. It's a little bit of everything across the board. Jacoby's not going to be, much better at any of that stuff. And quite frankly, I don't know that his arm is strong enough to hit those sideline passes that you have to when you're facing such a blitz. And at the end of the day, you're balancing wanting to win games this year and maybe sneak into the back end of the playoffs. But let's be real. I mean, they're nowhere close to as good as the Eagles. They're probably not as close to as good as the Cowboys. This team has a lot of room to grow up and build and be better. And, sneaking into the seventh playoff spot, maybe makes you feel good about this year, but it doesn't help you a whole lot for, long-term growth. So to me, even if Sam struggles and continues to struggle, I want to see him out there playing, because he's not going to get, maybe at some point you bench him for a game or two, give me Emmanuel Forbes, let him watch from the sideline and see what happens. But I want to give him every snap and every opportunity to prove that he is or he isn't the guy, so that when we go into this offseason coming up, which is going to be an extremely important offseason to the trajectory of this franchise, that they know whether they need to address quarterback first or whether they need to address O-line first.
Yeah, it feels like they've got to do O-line no matter what particular tackle. But to your point, what they're trying to do is not, they're not trying to do it. They're trying to win football games, which will be bad for your offensive tackle selection, which feels like we've needed here since Trent left. Have you been surprised? Rodriguez, who I liked at Kentucky, is getting more and more snaps. Has that surprised you a little bit about about how he's got it? Because the guys in previous years, when it came down to it, were hopeful to get 2 or 3 snaps a game. It feels like he's trending towards more snaps than that.
Yeah, I've been surprised with his effectiveness. After the Antonio Gibson fumble, the 2 fumbles, even though he recovered the one against Philly, kind of the dribble to himself.
Yeah.
You couldn't afford to give AG that many carries anymore. It's become a little bit of an issue, and so I expected Chris Rodriguez was going to pick up some of those carries in the games, but he's been good when he's had a chance to come in. I also don't think they've given Brian Robinson enough carries across the board. 72-28, 70-30 split pass to run is tough to win with in the NFL. And, I'm not somebody who's standing on the table saying they need to be 50-50 or 60-40, but you got to get a little bit better of a split between the run game. And you give yourself an opportunity, if you can establish a little bit of a run, to work in some play action, work in some misdirection. And it just hasn't happened. And so, I think Brian Robinson is on the field, for 60% of the offensive, 70% of the offensive snaps. And he's being a battering ram because he's just set back there, blocking, blitzing linebackers and trying to pick guys up, which is tough on, players' bodies. And you got to have somebody who can step in and run the ball a little bit. So I was certainly surprised that he's been as successful, but I want to see more from him. He fits all the young guys I want to see more from. He's certainly in that conversation.
2 more, and then we'll get out of here. You said we need to see more young guys. They're talking about playing more David Mayo. How does that make you feel?
I mean, their plan at linebacker is equally as flawed as their plan at offensive line. I mean, I guess at least they gave a run at it for picking Jamin Davis in the first round, but I think we all see kind of how that feels. There's no young linebackers on this team. You know, there's no real linebackers that are particularly good. Period on this team. David Mayo getting significant snaps on Sunday is going to be an issue. I mean, Dallas Goedert
Why
kicks
not
the
Khalil
Commanders'
Hudson?
butt anyway.
Why wouldn't you play Khalil Hudson instead?
Has Khalil shown much more?
No.
I know folks get excited about him out there, but he's might be a little bit. He's got the athleticism, but not the body size.
And then, of course, the fans are excited to see Jabril Cox. But how many snaps do you think Jabril Cox actually plays on Sunday? Because they love David Mayo.
Yeah, this staff likes who they like. You know, they're not shy about it. It's been 4 years of this. Folks shouldn't be surprised that they're playing the guys that they like and that they can, point to and say, that's my guy. I brought him in. Look at me. I'm the guy. I watched the tape. I'm the one that did. Like that's what this is. And it's part of the overall larger problem of all this is that as much as it is about winning football games on the field, it's also about playing these coaching games. Oh, all of my draft picks are active on game day. We had a good draft because all of our guys are active. I brought this guy in. I picked this guy in the 7th round. I'm going to play this guy because, that was me. That was us, and sometimes it feels like it's as important for this coaching staff to get credit for smart moves than it is for them to actually make the smart move. And I think you can look as far as the, Jamin Davis draft pick, the Jahan Dotson draft pick, just kind of picking guys that other teams didn't have ranked quite as highly. They like to tell people that they're the smartest people in the room and that they, see stuff that other coaches don't see. And I don't really know that that's true.
I assume that you don't expect the Commanders to win on Sunday, but if they do, how do they make it happen?
I'll tell you what, I expect it to be a close football game.
I do too.
The Commanders, first of all, always play the Eagles well. Where it's set up in the good game, bad game, good game, bad game, yes, ready for a good game. I think significantly, though, is what's going to be significant is Jalen Hurts' knee injury. You saw him at the end of the game on Monday night against the Niners. He was not full speed running, and then certainly coming off the field, he was limping pretty hard. He's going to play. I mean, I expect him to play, but the Eagles are playing the Commanders. They might have a little bit more of a conservative game plan and not want to, open up Jalen Hurts to taking any big hits, and maybe that limits their run game a little bit, and the Commanders can get after them and pin their ears back. But at the end of the day, as much as it's about what they do on defense, it's going to be about what they do on offense.
They scored 7 points last week. I couldn't agree more.
They scored 31 against the Eagles last time. It was their best offensive performance. They moved the ball up and down the field. Sam Howell looked comfortable in the pocket. They blocked well for him. He only took 5 sacks against the defense that's going to be very good. However, you look at that Eagles, front, and that Fletcher Cox, Jordan Davis, Jalen Carter group going against Tyler Larson, and whether it's Chris Paul or Ricky Stromberg,
doesn't matter.
Doesn't give you a ton of confidence. So, the spread is 7. I think I picked 31-27 Eagles.
Which smashes the over.
Do you think this defense can stop anybody?
No, not at all. No, but I mean, there's plenty of people that would tell you 31-13 gets you to 43.
31-13 is certainly on the table. I just did a Philly radio a little bit earlier, and they asked what I thought, and I was like, I believe in my head it's going to be a close football game. I've been saying 31-27, late Eagles touchdown to go ahead to win the game. The Commanders are in it the whole way. And as much as I am telling myself that and saying that out loud and trying to convince myself of that, Sunday afternoon massacre is always on the table, and 31-13 is always available.
If it's 31-13, do you think there'll be any movement on Monday? You think like I do, right? You think Ron's got the year at least? I mean, I know we did the percentages on him coming back, but do you think he'll make the year? Because I do.
I think he makes it to the bye week at minimum. Um, there's a chance because the bye week is so late in the year. I
So late.
believe week 13. Maybe at that point, and this I don't want to get too far down, negative road, but like if things go bad, maybe at that point, you can move on from him and make Eric Bieniemy the interim, and he has a full 2 weeks to kind of get his stuff together as they try and make the final run of things. But I think Ron will probably make it through the year.
All right,
Sorry to answer your question. Whatever happens on Sunday should not affect what this team does on Tuesday for the trade deadline. This team is who they are. There needs to be a realistic view of what's happening here, and one extra win on a Sunday shouldn't change things, because when you look at the last 9 games of this Commanders schedule, it's ugly. And I believe the only game they're going to be favored in is the Giants game here at home, and they might be double-digit dogs in 3 or 4 of those games. So just something to keep in mind.
Tell the folks at home what all you got going. What's the schedule look like for this weekend? I know you guys got a bunch of stuff for games.
Yeah. Well, follow us on the Beltway Football Pod, anywhere you get your podcasts. Watch us on Monumental Sports Network on Saturday and Sunday morning, particularly Sunday morning. We've been calling it our pregame show. And Monumental Sportsnet is the same network that NBC Sports Washington used to be. So for Commanders fans, the same place that you used to watch Commanders pre- and postgame shows with, B. Mitch and Santana and Jordan and JP and all of us. Same spot, same place you watch your Caps and Wiz games. That's now called Monumental Sportsnet. Sunday morning at 11 a.m. will be the Beltway Football Podcast show, TV show. And then after the game, we'll have a post-game podcast for you guys. Hopefully it'll be a little bit more upbeat than the one that we recorded driving home from the Meadowlands last week and coming back from New York.
All right, big guy. Well, I appreciate you hopping on with me, and I agree with you. I hope it's a better time on Sunday.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.